What if I told you that almost every decision you think you're making freely isn't actually your choice at all? What if your thoughts, your beliefs, even your deepest convictions are the result of invisible programming that started before you could even speak? Today, we're going to explore something that will fundamentally change how you see yourself and the world around you. This is the architecture of conditioning, and once you understand it, you can never unsee it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I explore the deeper aspects of human psychology and consciousness that most people never think about. And today's topic might be the most important one I've ever covered. We like to think we're free. We believe our thoughts are our own, our choices are autonomous, and our beliefs are the result of careful consideration. But what if that's all an illusion? What if we're living inside invisible prisons of conditioning that shape not just what we think, but how we think about thinking itself? The human mind constructs elaborate frameworks of belief that serve as navigational tools through complexity. Yet these very frameworks often become invisible constraints that limit our perception and restrict our capacity for authentic choice. This conditioning operates at multiple levels, from neurological habit formation to grand narratives of cultural indoctrination. Let's start at the beginning. Picture a child. Maybe it was you. That child enters the world with an incredibly limited perceptual field. Their parents aren't just caregivers, they're like gods in this tiny universe. Every casual comment, every expression of approval or disapproval carries massive weight. But here's what's really happening. That child isn't just learning facts or behaviors. They're absorbing fundamental assumptions about reality itself. The child who learns that love depends on being clean, quiet, or getting good grades isn't just learning rules. They re-internalizing deep beliefs about human worth and connection. And here's the kicker. They have no choice but to absorb this programming. Their survival depends on pleasing these authority figures. They can't compare notes with other families or seek alternative perspectives. They're trapped in a closed system of influence, making the conditioning process both thorough and incredibly resistant to change later in life. Through unconscious mimicry, the child doesn't just copy behaviors. They absorb entire worldviews, complete with all the emotional baggage and hidden biases. A parent's unconscious fears and prejudices become the child's natural view of reality. The dependency factor creates what psychologists recognize as profound identity confusion, where the authentic self becomes subordinated to externally imposed expectations. The child learns to monitor constantly for approval, adjusting behavior, thoughts, and even feelings to maintain that crucial connection. Now, you might think, well, I grew up and started thinking for myself. But did you really? Here's the disturbing truth. Our society is structured to provide what researchers call consecutive waves of relatively like-minded associates. Think about it. Your neighborhood determined your school. Your school influenced your peer group. Your peer group shaped your interests and career path. Your career determined your adult social circle. Each stage confirms rather than challenges the worldview you absorbed as a child. Even rebellion often just represents variations on the same themes. The hippies of the 1960s challenged specific social rules, but kept deeper patterns about authority and meaning intact. The forms changed, but the psychological dynamics remained the same. This happens because of something called perceptual set we automatically notice. Information that confirms our existing beliefs while filtering out anything that contradicts them. We literally live in different perceptual worlds based on our conditioning, seeing completely different aspects of reality as important and meaningful. The primacy effect ensures that first impressions and early learning carry disproportionate weight. Once established, these patterns become self-reinforcing through confirmatory perception, the unconscious selection and interpretation of experience, in ways that validate our existing assumptions, but individual conditioning is just the beginning. There are sophisticated social mechanisms that make belief transmission seem natural and inevitable. Think about how religions create what one researcher called fact-proof screens, frameworks that protect core beliefs from any challenge. The genius isn't in teaching specific beliefs, but in creating ways of evaluating truth that always favor the system's conclusions. Question the doctrine? That's just your ego-resisting spiritual truth. Doubt the ideology? That's evidence you've been corrupted by enemy propaganda. Professional training might be the most sophisticated conditioning system we have. Medical school, law school, graduate programs don't just teach information. They create powerful in-group identities where questioning fundamental assumptions feels like betraying your professional identity. The social and economic investment required makes embracing rather than questioning the system's beliefs almost inevitable. Who's going to spend 8 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to become a doctor? Then question whether the medical paradigm is correct? Here's where it gets really disturbing. The most powerful conditioning doesn't feel like conditioning at all. It creates the illusion of free choice while actually constraining decisions within predetermined boundaries. Remember Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments? Ordinary people shock strangers because an authority figure told them to. But here's what's crucial. They genuinely believed they were making free choices. They experienced moral distress while continuing to comply because the social dynamics made compliance seem like the only reasonable option. This isn't just about laboratory experiments. Consumer choices, political preferences, career decisions, they all happen within frameworks that channel behavior while preserving the feeling of autonomy. Modern marketing doesn't use direct coercion. It manipulates unconscious processes that influence behavior without triggering resistance. We constantly create rational explanations for decisions that were actually determined by factors completely outside our awareness. The hypnotized person who scratches their nose because it is doing exactly what we do when we rationalize choices that came from unconscious conditioning. Freudian defense mechanisms like rationalization demonstrate how we unconsciously deceive ourselves about our own motivations. The business executive who skips an important meeting due to feelings of inadequacy genuinely believes his absence was motivated by rational concerns about time management. These aren't conscious lies but unconscious protections against recognizing psychological realities that threaten our self-image. Language itself is a conditioning mechanism. Benjamin Lee Horf's research revealed how the categories we use to organize experience can determine behavior in life and death ways. Workers who behaved safely around gasoline drums became careless around empty gasoline drums, not because they didn't understand chemistry, but because the word empty triggered safety assumptions that overrode their technical knowledge. The labels we use don't just describe reality, they actively create it. A child labeled as a slow learner often becomes one, not because of natural limitations, but because the label creates expectations that limit both opportunities and self-concept. Once someone gets labeled antisocial, gifted, troubled, promising, that becomes the lens through which all their behavior gets interpreted. Evidence contradicting the label gets dismissed as exceptional, while confirming evidence validates the category's accuracy. Educational testing and psychological assessment claim to measure pre-existing traits. But research shows that expectations shape performance in ways that make these measurements self-fulfilling prophecies. The conditioning process doesn't just transmit explicit beliefs, but creates unconscious patterns of perception that operate below conscious awareness. Research on criminal stereotyping reveals how deeply ingrained assumptions about appearance and behavior influence law enforcement and judicial processes. These unconscious biases don't simply reflect individual prejudices, but systematic patterns of conditioning that permeate entire cultures. The association between attractiveness and moral worth influences everything from judicial decisions to educational opportunities, creating self-reinforcing cycles of advantage and disadvantage. Children perceived as attractive receive more positive attention, which enhances their confidence and social skills, which makes them more successful, which validates the original bias. The persistence of these patterns shows how conditioning operates through seemingly neutral social processes. So how do we break free from this invisible architecture of control? The first step is recognizing that our sense of autonomous choice might itself be conditioned. The beliefs you hold most dear, the values you consider fundamental, the assumptions that seem obviously true All of these might be products of conditioning rather than rational reflection. This recognition is deeply unsettling because it challenges the foundation of identity itself. But this unsettling is necessary for real growth. As long as we remain unconscious of our conditioning, we can't make truly free choices. We can only select from options predetermined by forces beyond our awareness. Real freedom requires stepping outside these frameworks and evaluating them from a perspective that isn't conditioned by them. This takes practices that cultivate awareness of our psychological processes, meditation, therapy, philosophical inquiry, genuine self-reflection. The goal isn't to eliminate all conditioning. That's impossible and would be destructive. It is to make our conditioning conscious so we can evaluate whether it serves our authentic development or constrains us within limiting inherited patterns. What we're really talking about is conscious evolution, developing the capacity to recognize and transcend the automatic patterns that typically govern behavior. This isn't about becoming completely independent of social influence, which would be neither possible nor desirable. It's about learning to choose our influences consciously rather than being unconsciously shaped by them. This requires both individual and collective effort. Personally, it demands rigorous self-examination and the courage to question our most cherished assumptions. Collectively, it means creating social structures and educational systems that support critical thinking and authentic development rather than just transmitting existing conditioning patterns. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're facing unprecedented challenges: environmental destruction, social inequality, political polarization, technological disruption. These problems can't be solved from within the same frameworks of thinking that created them. But the path forward isn't about rejecting all tradition or abandoning social connection. It's about developing the wisdom to distinguish between aspects of our cultural inheritance that serve life and growth versus those that perpetuate limitation and suffering.